Please be seated. The scriptures today hold before us some characteristics, some practices that are crucial for a life of faith. The first two foundations, and I think these are particularly paired, come to us from Jeremiah. They are truth and hope. 2 Timothy tells us about Scripture. In the parable today, Jesus tells about prayer. Truth and hope, Scripture, prayer. Now, it may be the case that the Old Testament's prophets tell the future. Sometimes they do that. But mostly, they tell the truth, even when the truth is not something that people want to hear. The harder the truth, the more important that it be said out loud. If Jerusalem is going to fall, then you say it. If things are a mess and a half, then you say it. If a painful uprooting is about to happen, well, you get the pattern here. Jeremiah told the truth. It got him in trouble more times than not. Found himself one time thrown into the muddy bottom of an abandoned cistern. The king wanted him out of the way just that much and did not want to hear another word this man had to say. Jeremiah tells the truth, not a rosy truth, but one upon which hope can be built. And oddly enough, telling the truth is a necessary accompaniment to hope. If you can't tell the truth, if you can't know the truth, any hope that will come with it is just going to be fake. It'll be pie in the sky, and you just can't believe it. And here's one of those paradoxes, grace-filled paradoxes in our faith. The more courageous we are in facing the truth, then the more splendid is the hope emerging from it likely to be. Surprising and life-giving hope. If hope doesn't come out of facing truth, then it is nothing at all. So Jeremiah is telling about the prospect of hope in today's reading. It's the same truth and hope that we find in the cross and death of Jesus and in his resurrection. There's so much truth about cross and death, and there is hope in resurrection. When we carry our loved ones to the grave, the prayer that we say over the beloved's body is, in sure and certain hope of resurrection from the dead. There in the face of death, we talk about a sure and certain hope. Telling the truth, it schools us in learning how to hope. Then the New Testament readings are about the Bible and about prayer. Now, any kind of faith is going to need these. I hope that I'm simply stating the obvious. But sometimes we expect too much from them, And sometimes, on the other hand, we don't take nearly enough from them. It is, for example, too easy to fall into a kind of magical thinking about prayer. And that is to say, sometimes we think that prayer has to do with finding a parking space at the doctor's office. Oh, sweet God, give me a place to park. I know that it is within your power to do that. That's just magical thinking. I'm here to tell you, you're going to find a parking space or you're not. And there's a little bit of magical thinking that was a fairly common practice about using the Bible during my Baptist childhood. There were preachers who would encourage you to take a Bible, this is not a Bible, take a Bible and open it up, and there on the page that you open it to will be something that you just need to hear right now. No, that is a random opening of the Bible. And anything more than that is magical thinking. So that's how we expect too much out of prayer and out of Scripture. They both actually require more from us than we often are willing to give. And in turn, here's another one of those paradoxes. They give more to us than we can ask or imagine. In 2 Timothy, Paul already knows that Timothy, his protege, has been learned in the Scriptures. From his childhood, his mother and grandmother have seen to that. Mothers and grandmothers have been doing that for centuries. And what a wondrous thing it is. Paul knows that Timothy understands the Scriptures. The Bible, you will notice, is big and it is unwieldy. There is a lot between those covers. It is by turns confusing, boring, exhilarating, profound, life-changing. All of those things and more. I have been poring over the Bible myself since I was a little boy. I think that I know the Scripture pretty well, but I will bear witness that how often do I come across a phrase or a word that I'm reading for the bajillionth time, and I look at it and I think, has this been here forever? Why have I not seen it or seen it in this way before? What a marvel Scripture is. And I think that that's the reason that we are able to come back to it again and again, because there is always more. Paul refers to all Scripture as inspired by God. And I believe that. I do not believe that Scripture is infallible or inerrant. And believe it or not, that is a newfangled idea, that Scripture is such a thing. It arose in the 19th century. And it arose as a part of a much larger intellectual process at the time, where people suddenly were feeling uncertain about life in ways that they had not before. And so they turn to look for things that will not fail them. And so there was a quest for infallible science and for infallible human reason, for an infallible pope, and yes, for infallible scripture. It's a package deal. They're different expressions of the same kind of anxiety. Very 19th century. In the early church, all the way through medieval times, readers of Scripture said that what is literally there on the page is the lowest level of understanding it. You get that and you build upon it. And so they put to use this wonderful practice of spiritual imagination to make sense out of Scriptures. They didn't think that they were inerrant, but they thought that they found in them a pathway to knowing God. And I think that's what it is. We put too much onto the Bible when we say that it is without error. Anglicanism, by the way, and here's a reason to be happy with our way of being Christian. We got over this whole business of infallibility with a book of essays published in 1889. And these scholars who wrote the essays said no to all the infallibilities that were floating around in the culture at that time. I am glad for that. And so our church, for example, has never had to fight about any tension between the geological record and the creation story. We look at them and say, oh yes, these are two different ways of telling a truth. They don't contradict each other. And prayer. Probably underutilized practice, but so very important. And this widow in the parable today, I mean, you have got to admire her. She knows that she needs something, and she is not going to take no for an answer, and she pesters the judge to the last nerve that he has. She will not give up. And Jesus says, by the way, this is how you should pray. You should pray and not give up. Pray as if your life depends on it, which is the case for the widow in so much need, so much. There was a story, 20 years ago or more, about a pastor of an enormous church in South Korea, 10,000 or more in the church. And this pastor was renowned for his intense life of prayer and his commitment to it. He prayed 3 hours every day. Now that's some kind of praying. Thomas Merton, the monk, was known for praying 9 hours a day. He didn't do much else. So this Korean church successfully joined another church about the same size, 20,000 to tend to. And one of the staff members working with the pastor said to him, well, you're not going to have time to pray for 3 hours every day anymore. And the pastor's response was, no, I have a greater burden, and I will have to pray even more now. And I think that story tells us something very important. Not nearly enough time in prayer, unrelenting. I feel the judge's pain every time I hear this parable read in church. She had to have justice, and she was not going to relent. And here's the posture for our praying, as if life depends upon it. For it does. Truth and hope, then prayer and a Bible. These gifts are given over to us for our lives as persons and for our lives as communities of faith. And I think that they're a life's work. You don't get to graduate from any of these things. Telling the truth, hoping, Scripture, I've read the book, I'll just move on to something else. Prayer, no. Relentless. Are these things duties? Well, probably so, but that does not capture the essence of these practices, these characteristics. These are things that sustain us for the long haul. Do they make us more divine? Yeah, maybe. They at least make us more human and closer to God. There's always room for us to become more human. And these practices, I'll tell you, they are absolutely pertinent to the life of Good Shepherd and to the life of St. Luke's. For your clergy and for all of your leaders, these are practices to hold close at this juncture in your life as a church. Pray always, Jesus says. And then I like what he says as the kicker. And do not lose heart.